When certain types of resources become uneconomical to use because they're so scarce, we will find others. My daughter is at that stage where you read dystopian novels, and so she's reading all these right now. So I don't know why. I didn't remember this stage, but she's going through it. I hope it's a stage. Yeah.
Questions?
Oh, there's one up here.
So what is your definition of wealth?
I knew she was going to. All right, we're out of time, so yeah. Yes, I actually did. Because this is such a hard question, and precisely because I've reflected on this, I thought I'm going to let Craig off the hook on this. So, because I presupposed that we kind of know what I'm talking about, right? Wealth is means to ends. Wealth is means to ends. Yeah, it's means to ends. And so it's not, for instance, we tend to think of wealth as a physical thing, right? You think of it as gold. But we only treat gold as wealth because of a kind of human agreement that it's a valuable thing based upon our like of gold. And so if you think about a person that is wealthy, materially wealthy, they have a capacity to achieve certain ends much more easily than people that don't. And so when we're talking about people that are extremely poor, what we mean is they don't have access to just the basic human ends. They don't have the capacity even to eat enough food, even to have access to shelter, even to care for their kids. And so wealth is essentially means. And so very often it gets trapped in physical things. But I think that this is one of these very difficult kind of philosophical questions. And so,
well, because wealth can be different kinds of things.
Absolutely.
And we're talking about material wealth.
That's all I'm talking about here. That's right. I'm not talking about spiritual wealth, right? Because there's also spiritual poverty. And there's a type of spiritual poverty that's a good thing. If you know that you're dependent upon God, that's a good position to be in. That's a type of spiritual poverty. And so you want to be careful about language slippage, right? But there's also a kind of spiritual wealth in which you're filled with the Holy Spirit and blessed by God, right? And there's also this danger where, if you just say the prayer the right way, God's going to make you really rich, right? There's all sorts of ways to get this stuff mixed up. But when I'm talking about material wealth, this is the kind of ironic thing, and I'll talk to the kids tomorrow, is that most of the preconditions culturally that allow material wealth to be created are immaterial. They're immaterial things. And so there's a weird kind of interaction. So I actually think that economics is one of the most sort of theologically and metaphysically interesting of the disciplines because it's an intersection between the material and the spiritual. So that's my definition. So.
Okay, just one more on that.
All right.
Could you just comment on the benefits to society of having people who create wealth?
Oh, absolutely.
I think that's something that's completely missed.
Yeah, it is. And so I would say because of the fact that all of us are created in the image of God, we all have the capacity to create value, to create wealth to some degree. And different people can create different amounts of wealth in different social settings. This is something that's easy to forget. So Rand, the reason people love Ayn Rand is because she's the only person that ever wrote novels that I've been able to find that actually made the industrialist, the entrepreneur, as entrepreneur, the hero. Right? Now, you might have Bruce Wayne, who happens to be a billionaire, but he's a hero as Batman. But very few people saw the heroic aspect of the entrepreneur. But what's interesting is that even the great entrepreneurs that you think of, Steve Jobs, if he had been born and lived his entire life in Haiti, Steve Jobs, same person, same genetic endowments, would have created far less wealth than he did because of where he lived. And so so we're all created in the image of God, but in different social settings, different laws and sort of surroundings can either be conducive to that creative capacity or they can not be conducive to it. Also, the reality is just as we all have different gifts and talents, some people have capacities for creating more wealth than others. And so, but if you understand that they're creating wealth, I like Steve Jobs because that's a really intuitive example, is that everybody knows, right, that he didn't just create wealth for himself. His acts of creativity benefited all of us. And so what you want is an economic system in which people with that capacity are able to exercise that capacity to the fullest extent possible. Part of the entrepreneurial capacity, though, is also a willingness to delay gratification and to take risk. Because of the fact that any kind of entrepreneurial act, most entrepreneurs create things and they don't actually even know quite what it's going to do after the fact. Bill Gates, about 1980, thought, no, probably there would be a need for maybe 2 or 3 dozen computers in the country. right? So he didn't have a sense of the kind of, and so very often, even the act of creativity that the entrepreneur engages in, he or she doesn't actually see all the sort of full consequences. And so what that means is that entrepreneurial acts of creativity will often fail. And so you have to have a system in which the people that have the capacity, the stomach for trying and failing, are able to try and fail several times. But if you try and fail once and you go to the debtor's prison or your head gets chopped off, right, that's not good for creating wealth. So we actually have a pretty good system for that. Now, strangely, if you look in terms of how easy it is to start a business and things like that, it's actually much easier in Sweden than it is in the United States. And so there's a lot of ways in which we sort of think of ourselves as economically free, but there's actually lots of burdensome things. Anybody that tries to start a business can tell you that it's like they're booby traps set up to prevent you from doing it. And so on the one hand, I wouldn't want to say, well, there's only a few really great geniuses that create all the wealth. No, we all do. And notice that Steve Jobs, his act of creativity, all the people working in the Apple Corporation themselves, then their activity is channeled into wealth creation as a result of that. And so his creativity allows the creativity and freedom of others to flourish as well. And so there's both as individuals created in the image of God, but also we're intrinsically social. And both of those pictures have to sort of come into play, I think, in order for this thing to work. So.
Great. Thank you, Dr.
All
Richards.
right, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so obviously, thank you, students, for being here. Any guests who are here, we welcome you back again tomorrow evening, same time, same place. Please come back. We would love to have you. This has been wonderful. Thank you, speakers this evening, and hey, have a great night. We'll see you guys in the morning.